Dear friends, Namaste. It's wonderful to be here today in this beautiful city, Fargo. You know, I've just come from Los Angeles. We have our monastery there, the Vedanta Society of Southern California, in Hollywood, no less. And so, when I said I'm going to Fargo, they said, oh, the movie Fargo, the place Fargo. I'm really thankful to the Interfaith Committee and the different bodies which got together to form the organizing committee for this beautiful event in this beautiful concert hall of the NDSU, that we can all come together and share certain ideas. As has just been mentioned, the date today, 9/11, in this event has twin significance. One, we all know. Nobody needs to remind us the terrible events that happened on September 11th, 2001. The other one, as was just mentioned, Swami Vivekananda, who could be regarded as the founder of our particular order, a monk of the Vedanta, who came here in 1893. And on this very day, 11th September 1893, in Chicago, delivered a talk, a very significant talk, pointing out the dangers of religious fanaticism and a call for religious harmony. So more than, say what I was calculating, 123 years ago, and just over 100 years after that, the terrible events of 2001, September 11, 2001 happened on the very same day. Now, India is a very interesting case study in religious harmony. Not many people know that apart from the indigenous religions of India, the other great world religions, the Abrahamic faiths, all have been there in India from almost their very inception. Christianity, just after Jesus, they say that Saint Thomas actually came to India, and the Syrian Christians have been there for nearly 2,000 years in India. Jews have been there in India from about 70 AD when the temple was first destroyed by the Romans, and there was a Jewish diaspora which has been there continuously in India for about the last 20 centuries. And I was interested to find out that the very second mosque ever built in Islam during the lifetime of the Prophet himself was actually built in the south of India, near the city Cochin, which still exists. And of course the great Indian religions, Buddhism and Jainism and Sikhism, and among all of them the most ancient living religion, Hinduism. Vedanta, which is a more correct term for Hinduism, I would say, represents the philosophical, the spiritual traditions of Hinduism. Swami Vivekananda, who was the first teacher of Vedanta to come to these shores, and after him so many have come. Today in America, yoga is so popular. It's all over the place. Sometimes I feel there are more yoga studios in California than there are in India. Words like karma have become part of our lexicon here in the United States, in the Western world. It all started with Swami Vivekananda. In fact, I can highly recommend this book, American Veda, by Philip Goldberg, which traces the growth and influence of Vedanta in America, starting with Swami Vivekananda. Now, Swami Vivekananda himself would often introduce his teachings by quoting from the Upanishads, the oldest living scriptures on this planet. And a particular verse was his favorite. I'll repeat it, I'll chant it out here in the original Sanskrit, and then we'll look at it in some more detail. It goes like this. It's beautiful Vedic Sanskrit. Shrinvantu vishve amritasya putraha aye dhamani divyani dastu vedaham purusham mahantam aditya varnam tamasat parastat tameva viditva ati mrityumeti nanyah pantha vidyate ayanaya. Now what does that mean? We do not know who said this It's lost in the mists of antiquity, but reliably at least we can sort of date it back to more than maybe 10 or 15 centuries before the Buddha. So it goes back to somewhere 3,000 or 4,000 years. And the sage here, it's a quotation from the Upanishads, the sage says, "Listen, ye children of immortal bliss, even those that dwell in higher spheres, in higher heavens." Listen. Listen to what? Vedaham Purusham Mahantam. I have discovered an infinite being. I have discovered the infinite being. That there is some infinite existence. Well, if such a thing is there, what is it like? Aditya Varnam, blazing forth like the sun, not with a material light like this, but with the light of consciousness, infinite consciousness. Tamasah Parastat. In Sanskrit that means forever beyond darkness. Beyond darkness, beyond the darkness of death and misery and suffering and frustration. Beyond darkness. And this is something that I have discovered. Very good, supposing you have discovered such a thing. What good does it do? What's the use of this thing you've discovered? He says, we don't even know if it's a he, because some of the Vedic sages were women too. Discovering this, knowing this infinite reality, one goes beyond death. Tameva viditva ati mrityumeti. One goes beyond death. Death, the human limitation, one transcends human limitation, human suffering. Nanya pantha vidyate ayanaya. There is no other way. Every other way that we adopt in human life, whether it is in politics or in economics or in science or technology, where we try to entertain ourselves, engage ourselves in commerce or building an empire or whatever, all of those ways have their limitations and all of them end in death. But there is something, an infinite reality which we can realize. And if we do realize, if we do experience this, then one goes beyond suffering. One enjoys infinitude. Now this to me is the essence of religion. You see, one of the conclusions of Vedanta is that all religions point towards this infinite reality. There is some infinite reality which is called by different religions in different names, but there is this thing which we can realize. This thing can be a personal God, the personal God of religion, which is called, the Christians call the Father in heaven, or the Jews would call Jehovah, the Muslims would call Allah. In Hinduism, you have different conceptions of God, Vishnu or Shiva, or in Hinduism, God can be female too, with forms like Durga or Kali or Saraswati. All of them are differing conceptions of this infinite reality. And these are personal, what one might call personal God. And this infinite reality is in itself impersonal too. The Vedantic conception of God or the infinite reality is also both impersonal and personal. On the personal side, the examples would be the God conceived of in different religions. The impersonal aspect is infinite consciousness and existence, pure consciousness, pure existence. Great saint and mystic of Bengal in 19th century, Vivekananda's guru, Sri Ramakrishna, gave this beautiful example. He said, imagine water. When it's very cold, water freezes into ice of different shapes or different forms. And it's like, by the devotion of the devotees, those who love God and adore God, you have a conception of God which we worship in different religions, in different conceptions of God. And he says, when the sun of knowledge rises, the ice melts back into the formless water. Formless and with form. And the with form can be a male deity, God can be male or female, and without form. Personal and impersonal. This is the central idea of the spiritual reality which the Vedas speak about. Another important thing which follows from this is that religion is realization. This is a great thing that Vedanta teaches us. This is a point that I would like to emphasize. Religion consists not only in believing something, in accepting a certain set of beliefs, not even in theology, theorizing about something, not even in just following a set of rules and regulations with the hope of a post-mortem reward, but actually realizing the divine in this life. Every religion has its tradition of mystics who have realized the spiritual reality spoken about in their religion in actual experience. Vedanta says mysticism is not only for a few exceptional souls. In fact, the purpose of religion, the goal of religion, is to realize this infinite reality. That is the goal of human life. That is the goal of religion. According to Vedanta, then, religion can be realized. It can become a matter of experience, and it should become a matter of experience. Swami Vivekananda defined religion in this way. He said, religion is the manifestation of the divinity already within us. That you can realize this divinity, you can experience this divinity already within us. And he spoke about different ways, we'll come to that. So, religion is realization. This is a central aspect of Vedanta, and we see that in Indian life. There have been so many sages and saints, both men and women, who have experienced God. That's what makes a man or a woman spiritual in the eyes of Indians. That have you experienced God? Do you only speak about God? Or have you experienced? This young man, Narendranath, became the monk Vivekananda. He used to go around questioning people in Calcutta. Have you seen God? And he went to his future master, Sri Ramakrishna. That's where he received the first direct reply. Have you seen God, sir? And the reply came from Ramakrishna, yes, I have. Just as I see you, even more clearly. And you can see God too. And in this country, Vivekananda would come and proclaim, in no uncertain terms, that if somebody comes and says, I have experienced God, I have seen God, but you cannot and you must believe me, do not believe such a person. If somebody comes and says, I have experienced God, God can be experienced and you too can do it, then you can believe such a person. You can actually accept and you can walk the path. So religion is realization. This is another aspect of Vedanta. The third aspect, which again follows from these Vedantic ideas, is the ancient, most ancient of the Vedas, Rig Veda, spoke of this. Truth is one, but the wise express it differently. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. This is from the Rig Veda. Now the importance of this cannot be overemphasized. When we are speaking about practicing peace in the wake of 9/11, this idea alone can be credited with maintaining peace and harmony in India through the millennia. Different religions in India have existed for thousands of years, and in harmony, sometimes in conflict, but they have coexisted with each other. They have learned to coexist with each other because of the central Vedantic idea accepted by the masses in India. Truth is one, it can be expressed in different ways. Sri Ramakrishna used to give a very homely example. In the village pond, he said, he saw different people of different communities coming to get water, and he noticed that the Bengalis, they call water jal in Bengali. And the Muslims would come and they would call it in Hindi, pani. And he said the Englishman comes, remember at that time the British were ruling India, and the Englishman comes to the same pond and he calls it water. Water, jal or pani, Sri Ramakrishna noticed, they're all referring to the same thing, the same reality. So, the same reality is referred to in different ways. Why different? Because that reality is infinite. You can express it in different ways. Because that reality, Vedanta says, avam manasa gochara, which literally means beyond thought and beyond speech. When you try to express something that is beyond language, in language, we are bound to use different kinds of language. None of the expressions actually exhaust the infinite nature of that reality. Sri Ramakrishna, you give another beautiful little example. A little ant found a mountain of sugar and went there and took one grain and ate it, and then sort of tugged one grain out to take back to its ant hill, and while tugging it along, looked back at the mountain of sugar and said, "I'll come back tomorrow and take the whole of it." Now, that is as ridiculous as trying to say that I or my religion or my theology or my understanding of religion has encompassed the whole of God. It's impossible. It's like that little ant saying, "I'll take the entire mountain of sugar along with me." He may want to, he's greedy, but it's impossible. He cannot do it. So the infinite reality, when it's expressed in different religions, in different cultures, in different philosophies, the expressions are different. But there is one common thread running through all of that. They're all talking about the same reality. I'm proud to say that I've come from the Vedanta Society of Southern California, where about 50 years ago, the writer and philosopher Aldous Huxley, novelist and philosopher also, Aldous Huxley, he worked there and started this trend of perennialist thought in religion. He wrote this beautiful collected this beautiful collection of spiritual writings called the Perennial Philosophy. I highly recommend that book. And it was written in the Vedanta Society of Southern California about 40-50 years ago, where the central thesis was this very thing, that if you look at the great spiritual traditions of humanity, we find that there is a common thread of, there's a spiritual reality they are speaking about in different language. Practices are different. The cosmology is different, the mythologies are different, but one cannot deny they're talking about some infinite transcendent reality. And they all talk about experience, spiritual experience. So Sri Ramakrishna came to this conclusion. In Bengali, his homely Bengali, he would say, "Jato mat tato pat." As many faiths, so many paths to that reality. So the different religions are different paths to that reality. Sometimes we are accused of saying that you are teaching that all religions are the same. Neither Sri Ramakrishna, nor Vivekananda, nor Vedanta has ever said that all religions are the same. The religions are of course different, and it's great that they are different. They enrich human civilization because they are different. They are express different parts of the economy of God. So, all religions, they are different and they are unique, but they are all different paths to God. In fact, from the Vedantic perspective, this is what gives validity to religion. A religion is valid not because of a book, not because such and such person has said it. A religion is valid because it is a valid path to God realization, to spiritual enlightenment. Does it take you to God? Does it make you a spiritual person? Does it solve the spiritual problems of life? Yes, it's a valid religion. So that's another idea. Ekam sat vipra bhavada vadanti. Truth is one, the wise express it differently. So that all the religions become different paths to one reality. I have seen this in India. In our main monastery near Calcutta, I have seen on a special religious occasion, it's on the bank of the Ganges river, which is very holy to Hindus. So scores of Hindu women folk coming for a special festival near the bank of the river. It's called the Chhat festival. It's a kind of worship of sun as God. And when they come to the monastery to go to the bank of the river, they pass by a mosque. So an Islamic mosque. And when they pass by, I've seen, and it's a common thing in India, you see all those women who are not very literate, not very educated, they pass by and they bow down like this and go. Now, they're all Hindus. But the idea is, this is also another form of worship. This is also another form of religion. They are worshipping the same God in a different way. And this is so common. This understanding is so deeply rooted in Hinduism. Maybe many people, ordinary people in the villages, they cannot quote the Sanskrit, but they will tell you in their local language, in the village language, they will tell you, well, it's all one reality. They will tell you that. And it's easy to come by that understanding in India because you have Some people worship Krishna, some people worship Rama, and some people worship Vishnu. And to the outsider it looks like the rankest polytheism. But it is not. If one goes closely and listens closely, when the mantras are chanted during the worship of that particular deity, you will find exactly the same attributes are given to each of these deities. That they are omnipotent and omniscient, and the creator of the universe, and the preserver of the universe, the giver of grace, and also that they come in all different forms. So everybody who worships there, in India, the Hindus, they recognize that though I worship in this form, and he or she worships in that form, all of them are referring to ultimately one reality who's beyond forms. Often in pujas, we just had Ganesh Puja yesterday, there was a beautiful function here which I attended. You will find the mantras which are chanted. At the end there will be an asking for forgiveness. Thou who are in reality beyond form, we worship you with form. Thou who are omnipresent, we have worshipped you in this particular image. So forgive us for our impudence in trying to do this. So, in all these forms, the Hindus are used to this kind of worship. And so, for them to accept another conception of God, so when the Christian comes with his or her conception of God, it's perfectly alright for the Hindu. Many of you may be surprised to know that Jesus Christ is worshipped and revered. In fact, in our monastery in Southern California, on the altar you will find the icon of Jesus Christ. In our main monastery in Calcutta, in India itself, Christmas is celebrated with the same rituals which we worship the Hindu god or goddesses. And that's an important festival in our monastery. So it comes very naturally to a follower of Vedanta. I am reminded of this book written by Robert Wright, The Evolution of God. So he speaks about how the concept of God has evolved over the centuries in the Abrahamic faiths. So he speaks about Christianity, about Judaism, Christianity, especially Christianity and Islam, how the conception of God has evolved. And then in the final chapter, he mentions, just once he mentions Hinduism and Vedanta. He says, what are the prospects for peace between the great Abrahamic traditions? And he says, I know of only one formula which has worked successfully anywhere in the world. And he mentions this. Truth is one, but the wise speak of it differently. And he says, this is a formula which the ancient Hindus discovered thousands of years ago. And it has been absorbed by the civilization in India, and it has prevented rivalry and bloodshed between the different factions of Hinduism and between Hinduism and different religions. The Buddha, who rejected traditional Hinduism, the Vedic Hinduism, the rituals of Hinduism, and struck out on his own path. The Buddha is regarded as an incarnation of Vishnu, as an incarnation of God by the Hindus, and worshipped by all Hindus. We do, I know that, and I know all Hindus accept the Buddha as an incarnation, as a great spiritual personality. So, this is another aspect. The truth is one, but spoken of in different ways. All religions become paths to that one reality, and that reality can be experienced. Not only can it be experienced, it is the goal of our lives. Whatever we are trying to do in life, we are actually trying to attain happiness and overcome suffering. And if you ask, what is the goal of Vedanta? The answer is very surprising. They say the goal of Vedanta is Atyantika Dukkha Nivritti, completely transcending, overcoming suffering, and Paramananda Prapti, attainment of ultimate bliss. So exactly what we have, human life, what we are all struggling to do, whether we are earning money or chasing pleasure or whatever, science or art or religion, basically what we are trying to do is to find peace and joy and happiness, something more stable and deeper and more. Vedanta is exactly that. And the claim is that once you realize this infinite reality, you get this permanently. You go beyond suffering. Here is another great aspect of Vedanta, very interesting aspect of Vedanta. Let us ask ourselves, If I realize God, suppose I realize God, suppose I have some kind of vision of God, or whatever, a spiritual experience, how do I go beyond suffering? God is infinite, immortal. God is beyond suffering. I can understand if such a God exists, God is beyond suffering. But if I am a limited human being, how do I go beyond suffering by seeing God or getting some kind of mystical experience? That mystical experience might be nice, might be blissful, but how does it solve my problems? I'm going to die. I'm subject to death and disease and failure and frustration in life. How does it solve my problems? And the answer given in Vedanta is very interesting. There is only one case, there is only one possibility that knowing something transforms you into that thing. Knowing the immortal God transforms you gives you immortality. Knowing the God beyond suffering takes you beyond suffering. There is only one possibility. How can that happen? If I know this lectern, I don't become the lectern, that would be awful. So, how is it that knowing God transforms you into God? Vedanta says, Brahma Veda Brahmaiva Bhavati. The knower of Brahman, the infinite reality, becomes Brahman. How is that possible? Here is the central message of Vedanta, if I may put it this way. The central message of Vedanta says, that thou art. Tat Tvamasi. One of the Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, is repeated 9 times. You are that. You are that infinite reality. That infinite reality is not an external reality, not an other. In the beginning of spiritual life, we conceive of God as an other. Somewhere in heaven, somewhere, but not me. As we go further in spiritual life, we discover God within, in our own consciousness. And finally, as we come to maturity in spiritual life, we find God both within and in the world outside. That infinite reality, which Vedanta speaks of, and claims that all religions speak of that reality, we, each of us, we are that one infinite reality. We just do not know it. In Vedanta, the problem is conceived of as ignorance. We are ignorant of our own reality. And being ignorant of our own reality, we identify ourselves with these limited bodies and minds, and we struggle through life. Vedanta also speaks of karma. Why do we have this life? It's because of our own karma. What happens to our life, in this life, is a result of what we have done in this and previous lives. And what we do in this life will determine our future existences. But Vedanta says all these limited existences which we experience in this life, or in the past, or in some future life, these are not who we really are. We really are that infinite Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss, which in religion is conceived of as God. In our innermost reality, we are one with that. And the goal is to know that. The question arises, all this is fine, but how do you know that? How do you realize that? And this is where Vedanta speaks of different methods of attaining that. There's the method of path of knowledge, Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. There's the path of love, Bhakti Yoga. There's the path of meditation, Raja Yoga. And there's the path of unselfish work, Karma Yoga. The path of knowledge uses the sheer force of understanding and thinking and intellect, philosophy of a particular kind, darshana, it's called in India in Sanskrit, to inquire into the question of who I am. Am I this body? Is this who I am? But this body has changed so tremendously since my childhood. It was a little baby, and then the little child, boy or girl, and the teenager, and the young person, and the middle-aged person, and the old person. The body has changed so dramatically. And yet I feel I was that baby, I was the child, I was the teenager, the young person, and now this old person. Hence, I cannot be this body. I can see the changes of the body. And there are so many arguments, so many ways it is pointed out how we are not this body. One of the arguments is this. Think about it. It's worth thinking about. Anything that we know is an object of our knowledge. So you can see me. I'm standing here. I'm an object of your knowledge. You can see me. And that which you know, the object of your knowledge, is different from the subject. You, the knower, you are different from what you know. So, the object, what we know, is a separate existence. And I, the knower, am separate from what I know. Now, if we apply it to this body, the result is very interesting. We see that this body is also an object of knowledge. We can very well see the body. We can feel the body. Especially when you're sick or hungry or tired, you feel the body. If you feel the body and know the body, then it is an object of knowledge. And in being an object of knowledge, it must be different from you, the knower, the one who knows this body. You, the consciousness, who are aware of the body. And the same argument applies to the mind also. Thoughts, feelings, emotions, our personality, our ideas. This is what we consider to be ourselves, who I am. But even that is an object of knowledge. Those are objects of knowledge. Are we not aware of our own personality? Are we not aware of our own ideas and memories and thoughts? If we are, they must be different from us. And so the path of knowledge takes us step by step, showing us how we are not the body, how we are not the mind. We are an immortal witness consciousness. That's the path of knowledge. And there are so many techniques used. There's the path of meditation, which is very popular and very well known all over the world. Yoga, the most ancient manuals of meditation, Patanjali Yoga. How? By calming the mind. We're talking about peace, practicing peace. The path of yoga is the path of peace. One person said that he worked with peace activists, anti-war activists. And he said these peace activists were among the angriest people I knew. They are angry for a good reason. They are angry against war or violence or something bad. But if you're going to work for peace, you need to be peaceful. If I'm going to work for peace, I need to be peaceful. And the most profound, lasting, deepest experiences of peace you can have through the practice of yogic meditation, Patanjali Yoga. The idea there is, if we calm the mind enough, the consciousness which we are, the reality beyond the mind, will be clearly discerned. You can separate the mind and yourself, the witness consciousness, when the mind is calm. Swami Vivekananda gives the example of the clear waters of a lake, absolutely still and clear water. You can see through to the bottom of the lake. That's the path of meditation. There's the path of love. This is more common. This is what we experience in different religions of the world, where this infinite reality is conceived of as God and worshipped through rituals, through prayer, through song. And most of the practices in different religions are this path of love or devotion, bhakti yoga. And then there's the path of service. Instead of working for ourselves, engage ourselves in altruistic action for the welfare of others as a worship of God. Vedanta speaks of service to humanity, service to all living beings in fact, knowing them to be God. God being immanently present in all beings. You can worship God through service. When you help the homeless, when you teach the illiterate, when you treat the sick, nurse the sick, in every way you are worshipping God in those forms, in those beings. So, in these ways, these are four broad ways: the path of knowledge, the path of love, the path of meditation, and the path of unselfish service. The four yogas, Swami Vivekananda called it. And they are not mutually exclusive. You can have various combinations depending on your inclinations, on your personality, on your particular proclivities. You can pursue different paths of spiritual practice. And each of them leads to the most profound peace. We become a center of peace, and we radiate peace all around ourselves. I'm sort of out of time now, but I'll quickly summarize within a couple of sentences what I have said. Vedanta holds there is an infinite, impersonal and personal also reality common to all of us. It does not matter whether we believe it or not, whether we become a Hindu or do not become a Hindu. What is the Vedanta position on accepting or not accepting a religion? Swami Vivekananda said, more than 100 years ago in this country, do I wish that the Christian would become a Hindu? God forbid. Do I wish that a Hindu would become a Buddhist or a Buddhist a Muslim? God forbid. What I want is that a Christian would be a better Christian and a Hindu a better Hindu, a Muslim or a Buddhist a better Muslim or a better Buddhist. So this is the goal which Vedanta says. If all the paths are valid, this is the second point, is that all the paths are valid paths to the experience of that one reality. In that case, we can all follow these paths and we can all learn from each other, from the different spiritual traditions of humanity. They are our common heritage. Hinduism or Christianity does not belong only to the Hindu or the Christian. It belongs to all of humanity. It's a spiritual treasure of humanity. So, we can practice and we can realize God. That's the second thing. Realization of God is the goal of life. And it is what gives validity to the religions. Third, the differences of religions are all to be valued. The religions are all different paths to that realization. There's no need for conflict. And fourth, there are different paths of practice, through knowledge or through devotion or through work or through meditation, and we can all do this and become enlightened. I'll end here, and I think we have a short question answer session now. Yes. So thank you very much. Thank you for giving me a patient hearing.
Thank you so much, Swamiji. That was a beautiful demonstration and lecture. We really had a very peaceful atmosphere here. I'm sure that everyone takes away the same message that you tried to convey. So we will do a short 10 minutes question-answer session. And before leaving, I will request you to sign or leave a contact for yourselves at the guest book in the front table. So starting with the Q&A, there's a microphone set up right here in the front of the door. So we will start with anyone who has a question, and you can walk up to the microphone and be as short and specific in your questions. Thank you.
I think we also have arrangement for food afterwards. Yes, you forgot to mention that. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you can't have religion on an empty stomach. Yes, there's a question there.
Yes, I want to know if there's online classes or classes which I could take to learn more.
There are many different organizations today which are teaching different forms of Vedanta. In our particular society, the Vedanta Society of Southern California, we have a YouTube channel. So you could listen to the talks there. They are video recorded. You just have to search for the Vedanta Society of Southern California on YouTube. So some texts of Vedanta have been taught in their entirety. Those texts are openly available on the internet. So one can actually sit with the text in hand and listen to the teachings and learn as we go along. Yes, one can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Give me a difficult one. Yes.
Oh.
Do come up here.
Oh, I'm pretty loud, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, to reach you. I came from a very strong religious background. My father was all the time he was playing, khol, kortal, those kind of.
A Vaishnava religious background? Vaishnava?
Vaishnava, yeah. And is there any conflict between, he always used to refer to Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
And so is there any conflict between Vedanta and Gita? Because you never mentioned about Gita.
Right. So is there any conflict between Vedanta and Gita? Of course not. In fact, it's a good occasion to tell you about the central texts of Vedanta. If you want to learn Vedanta, what are the canonical texts? What are the root texts? The source of Vedanta, as the name indicates, is the Veda. And in the concluding portions of the Vedas, there are these texts called Upanishads. So the Upanishads form the core texts of Vedanta. So these Upanishads, and they're still there, you can find beautiful translations have been made by different scholars in different languages. So Upanishads are openly available on the net. And the teachings of the Upanishads have been collected and summarized by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, the Bhagavad Gita is the best text of Vedanta. When you study Vedanta, we study three kinds of texts. The Upanishads, which are a collection of texts, the Bhagavad Gita, and a text which you need not, I would not recommend it at all, Brahma Sutras. As somebody said that if you want to fry your brains, you need to go to that text. That's a philosophical text. Very subtle discussions of philosophy are there. But Bhagavad Gita is a central text. There is no other text which is more important to Vedanta than the Upanishads, than the Bhagavad Gita. Though the Upanishads are the root text. In fact, a little boy, Hindu boy, asked me, Swami, the Christians study the Bible, the Muslims study the Quran, but you said that our central texts are the Upanishads. We don't study the Upanishads. Not many people study the Upanishads. So I said to him that most Hindus, they have read or they know something about the Gita. He said, yes. That's good enough, because whatever is in the Gita is basically a summary of the teachings of the Upanishads. So Gita is a central text. But remember, there are different forms of Vedanta. Different spiritual masters have commented, have written commentaries on the Upanishads and the Gita. So there are different forms. So there is a Vaishnava approach to it. And there are different forms. There is one kind of approach which is a non-dual approach, which is based on the commentary of Shankaracharya about 1200, 1300 years ago. So there are all these different approaches. And that's good. It makes Vedanta all that more rich. One more point I will mention here. Is there a conflict? Somebody asked me, this is a Muslim gentleman, is it wrong to say that my religion is the best religion of all? You might off the cuff say that, yeah, that's not a good thing to say. But you know, if you are really going to practice something, you always want it to be the best. So you would want your practice to be the best. Why would you practice something as otherwise? Is it legitimate to say my religion is the best religion? Yes, for me. For me. Sri Ramakrishna put it very beautifully. He said that the daughter-in-law, when you get married into a family, she has a very close relationship with her husband, and through her relationship with her husband, her relationship is established with the husband's family, father-in-law, mother-in-law, brothers and sisters-in-law. She has relationship with all of them. They all belong to her family now because of her relationship with her husband. So that's the central relationship. In the same way, your relationship with your spiritual practice, your religion, is your closest relationship. And that's the best relationship for you. And it's because of that relationship that you respect and revere and learn from other traditions. But your own spiritual practice and your religion is the best one for you. What a beautiful way of putting it. Yes, thank you. Question.
Swamiji, you said a while ago that the knower is different from the known.
Yes.
So in that case, if one really knows the Brahman,
yes,
won't that contradict Tattvamasi?
A beautiful question, but a difficult one. That's a subtle question. But yes, that's enough to set me up into an entirely new Vedanta talk. But we don't have time for that. Let me just put it this way. In Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta, there is only one ultimate reality. Only one ultimate reality. And that is Brahman, or what we call God. That reality alone appears as all of this. Now, if that is so, if the knower and the known are separate, if I separate myself from the body and mind and I am some kind of infinite consciousness separate from all this body and mind, how is there one reality? That will be a first problem. The second problem will be, if I know Brahman, if I realize Brahman, won't Brahman be different from me? So these are the two questions. One question is, if I separate myself, if the knower separates itself from the entire universe, how is it one reality? There are at least two realities, the knower and the known. And second question is what you asked. If Brahman is realized, if Brahman is known in some sense, isn't the knower and the known different? Right. The answer to this is this. If you've got the question, the answer will make sense.